Activities are revving up in Nigeria's energy industry, from oil and gas asset sales to new investment collaborations between local and industry players, as well as policy and regulatory changes in the emerging electricity sector. All these and more are expected to be at the top of conversations at the Nigeria Energy Roadshow Summit in Lagos, June the 25th. We're going to be speaking with Verna Ayukegba, who is a senior vice president at the African Energy Chamber. He joins us now live from South Africa to discuss the Nigeria Energy Investment Summit. Great having you on the Arise Exchange. Good evening. So, what are some of the recent developments in Nigeria's oil and gas sector that should excite investors?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. Well, a number of deals are very exciting, which we see and that actually excite investors. First, we're looking at Seplat's acquisition of ExxonMobil assets in Nigeria. $1.3 billion, we just heard recently that the NNPC is lifting its objections. That's great news for the market, and that's great news to show that Nigeria is not stifling deals overall. Then we're looking at Oando taking over E&I assets in Nigeria, which is going to increase Oando's production by about 100% to 50,000 barrels a day. Again, that's great news and showing really that Nigerian indigenous explorers and indigenous oil and gas companies are coming of age. Then you have the Shell deal, where you have a consortium of 6 Nigerian companies taking over Shell's entire onshore portfolio. Now, my actual best is really Tetraco, which is an indigenous Nigerian company that recently commissioned 5.3 million standard cubic feet CNG plant just outside of Lagos in Ogun State. That's amazing news. Why? Because here we are looking at a particular company which is looking to pretty much commercialize gas within Nigeria. I mean, gas has significant potential to be able to drive industry, looking at some of those clusters outside of Lagos to be able to provide them with gas. That's amazing. Of course, you also have UTM, which is doing floating LNG. So there's a lot of activity which we see, which is showing that Nigeria is back in business. And that's very exciting across the board for investors.
You've touched on all the good things, but what about the challenges facing the oil and gas sector? If a prospective investor who comes to this energy summit and talks to you about the oil and the thefts in the region, the aging infrastructure. We had the CEO of Total Energies at the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali, which we Arise News covered, where he said because of policy flip-flops, he's announced a deal in Angola. Nigeria also has not met its OPEC quota and is not able to defend its currency as a result of not being able to sell enough oil. So what about the challenges, though? Is that going to be highlighted at the summit?
I like that point. We need to be honest that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Nigeria. Surely, one of the things which we're looking and which is positive is the go-ahead on the Seplat deal, which is showing that those policy stifling seems to be easing out. Of course, you're looking at what is happening really with respect to significant imports, which is going to reduce as the Dangote refinery continues to increase. So yes, you do have those challenges on the currency, for example, where you had to defend the currency, and that was certainly an issue. But of course, when you see gas being processed and utilized internally, long term, if we can continue on that trend, then you are likely to see cheaper access to power industry rather than what we've seen recently with unstable power as well as significant use of diesel. So yes, I agree with you. There are significant challenges. One of them is finance. And we will be in Lagos with a lot of our financial stakeholders, a lot of international banks, due to these deals that have happened, are really looking to come back and be part of those deals. So we need to ensure that capital, which is a shy ray, can come back to Nigeria and be able to take part in those opportunities. It is really incumbent on government to continue to facilitate and ease things. Nigerian entrepreneurs have shown for a long time that they are, and they have tremendous ability to be able to create stuff. But what they need is an enabling environment. And I agree with you. Government needs to do more to facilitate that.
About the overarching narrative of renewable energy, and this push, perhaps you can say, is coming from the West, but we are seeing, even where you are in South Africa, because of the load shedding from ESCOM, you're seeing a lot of South African. I see there's a lot of capital importation coming in for solar energy, renewable energy, and so on and so forth, and basically cleaner energy. Is that something that will be discussed or ignored at the summit? Is oil and gas still going to be powering forward, or is the pivots to renewable energy going to be a hurdle that you discuss?
Well, thank you so much for bringing this up. We at the African Energy Chamber continue to believe that we need a varied mix with respect to Africa's energy problems, be it in Nigeria or be it in South Africa. We continue to speak about renewable topics, but what we try and say is that we do not have to be dogmatic about these things. When we come to Nigeria, we will be talking about those opportunities that are clearly there and those opportunities that are commercial. The way I see it, if you have a commercial solar project, you should bring it to the table, and we are happy to support you to be able to drive that. But then if Nigeria has significant amount of gas, and gas has been shown to be able to significantly drive industrialization in many other countries, then I think Nigeria needs to double down on gas. Everybody understands that, and that's why we had the declaration of the decade of gas a couple of years ago. Now it's time to put that into place. We need to continue pushing people like Tetraco to be able to make sure that they can even do more. We need to see others to enter into the game. Of course, I love the crude deals, but the crude is significantly meant for export. We need to get gas infrastructure within Nigeria, which is looking at supporting and providing and making sure that we can produce more power in Nigeria. There's a huge demand, not just in Nigeria, but outside. And so, yes, solar is important. All other power sources are important. But looking at Nigeria's current situation, I think we need to double down on gas rather than be some sort of dogmatic about renewables.
Okay, excellent point on gas. Nigeria is supposed to be a gas giant, and I'm glad you've mentioned the point that, the crude deals are nice, but it really needs to be focused on gas. But one of the issues that we've seen is that gas is very capital intensive. You've mentioned the decade of gas. There's supposed to be deals with Morocco with that transatlantic pipeline and so on and so forth. Do you think you'll be able to get sizable deals from participants at this forum that can be geared towards improving the amount of capital that goes into extracting gas from Nigeria? Because the extraction of gas, the way it works now, it's a byproduct of the extraction of crude. So it's from the extraction of crude, and then you get a little bit of gas from there. So we haven't really tapped into our potential. But then one of the issues is the amount of capital needed. So do you think that's something that will be realized from this summit when it's all said and done?
We will be talking about it, but I need people in the industry. I need significantly key stakeholders to understand it's all about a business of gas. It's not just about proclaiming the decade of gas. We have to look at the business of gas. And if we're looking at something like gas to power, for example, it's not about just the availability of the gas resources in the ground. We need to look at facilitating those purchasing power agreements that lead to gas being commercialized in the right manner. I don't think that in a country where you just had 600,000 barrels a day refinery built, close to $20 billion, that we can't get gas to power deals done. I do believe that we can do that. They don't have to be multi-mega projects every single time, but certainly there is ability to be able to put those into place. The ability of Nigerians to be able to structure infrastructure deals. We need government to look down the line. It's not just about gas from the wellhead. You need to look at the purchasing power agreements. You need to ensure that the discourse are working well, the distribution down the line is working well as ultimately you need to look at tariffing, and you need to look at the price of power in that sense, and all of that has a role to play. So certainly we will be talking and trying to make sure that across the entire value chain, we bring in stakeholders to be able to look at these problems and make sure that we can get more gas commercialized in Nigeria.
Fantastic. I'm really I'm glad we got you on the show here because you're really touching on these key issues. And I heard you just mention tariffs and appropriate pricing. That has been a challenge here in Nigeria. The Gencos are owed, trillions. The value chain, the energy value chain, rather electricity value chain, if you will, in Nigeria is also an issue as far as pricing is concerned. Will a more liberalized pricing structure be discussed at this? Because, it has to be said, the Nigerian government has been subsidizing energy to the detriment of investment because players don't want to come into the sector because they don't feel they will realize their proper returns because prices are capped. To be fair, the Minister of Power, Honorable Minister Adelabo, has been pushing for more cost-effective tariffs. Conversations are being had, but we want to see more action there. So is that something else that will be touched on as well?
We talk about this all the time. And the reason being, it is not just a problem in Nigeria, it's a problem across Africa. We do understand that power gets seen as some kind of a public good. But I do think if you were to hold put a question out to Nigerians and to say, you're going to have to pay more for power, but you're going to have a reliable power. I am definitely sure that we're going to have Nigerians who are going to come on board. If you look at telecom industry, it was expensive, but the more you bring competition into the play, the more you liberalize it and make it easy, then you're going to get investors. You said it yourself. Investors are shy to be able to come in because of those prices that are capped, sometimes even unreasonably capped, and not being able to basically meet the requirements of investors, not just investors globally, but even investors in Nigeria. So one needs to ask himself what it is that is going on. I do believe we need a total liberalization of the market to be able to enable the investment that is necessary to come in. And if government has to subsidize, I do believe government has to look for different ways to be able to facilitate and subsidize. But then power has a price, and it has a price in Nigeria. And investors are not going to come in if at all they don't think they can realize the kind of benefits that they realize in other sectors or in other countries when you're looking at power.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, there's also the annual African Energy Week for 2024 in Cape Town. That's also fast approaching. I mean, South Africa, of course, be making headlines with energy. What will be the highlights and how much is being done, to host that important event for the continent as well?
Oh, for us, a couple of things are going to be the highlight. It's finance. Financing energy in the age of energy transition is one of the key things. So we're seeing with interesting deals like the one which you've mentioned, like the ones we've talked about in Nigeria. We're seeing as well deals in Congo, Brazzaville, as well as Gabon. So across the continent, there is a resurgence around a demand for energy, traditional fossil fuels. And so ultimately, there is also a demand to be able to finance that. We're seeing a flurry of financiers globally having interest, and we're going to be there. One of the key things which we are looking at to focus during Energy Week is women entrepreneurship in the energy and oil and gas sector. We at the Chamber do believe that we need to make sure that the next generation of millionaires and billionaires in the industry are predominantly women, because we do believe that ultimately that is going to significantly drive and change our continent for the better.
You see,
so we will be focusing on putting women entrepreneurs at the center of conversation to be able to ensure that we can get them to be able to meet the right stakeholders, the right financiers. That is a big thing for us.
Again, this is one of the most honest conversations that we've had here on the show on energy. And I do want to touch on that point because as you were speaking, we put up the flyer for the summit coming up in Cape Town. There's only one woman there. I'm counting. There is literally only one woman to the right of the screen. So, is one of the moves you're going to make, try to get more female speakers at these events in the future?
Well, I hate to correct you on air, but that's just one of multiple flyers which we have. So ultimately, yes, the one which you had significant public stakeholders in terms of ministers and all whatnot. So I like that you've brought that up, because what that means is we need to go back to our governments and be able to say we do need significant leadership increase in the amount of women who are part of our governments and who are part of leading other major state institutions. If you look at what we have under the hub in terms of other flyers, in terms of other entrepreneurs, you'll see a significant increase in the representation of women. We need it.
I do want to ask you about, and I know this is climate change, right? There's Hajj that was going on. I think there were about 14 or 15 people from Jordan that died because of, I think it was the extreme heat. There was the turbulence issue that took place where in a Singapore flight from London to Singapore that had to land, the emergency landing in Bangkok. One person died. They're saying the turbulence was caused by climate change. What is climate change going to be a discussion here at any point during this your summit?
Climate change is always a conversation that we have. We do believe that climate change is an issue. We do believe that we need to address climate change. But what we always try and highlight is that we can only address climate change adequately if at all we have an honest conversation with respect to climate change. What we often see is that climate change is used as an excuse to be able to stop, reduce, slow, or delay investments in the oil and gas and energy space, particularly in Africa. In a world where the fridge of a single American in California uses more energy than a whole village in the north of Nigeria, I do think when we are talking about climate change and about emissions reductions, we need to start where the emissions are being produced. And in that particular scale, I think we need to even think about emissions 20, 30, 40 years, 50, and even 100 years ago. Because Africans need to industrialize and Westerners need to decarbonize. That's our position. And the simple reason for that is our kids also have the right to have reliable and affordable power in schools, in educational facilities, in hospitals. And so we are unapologetic about trying to get Nigeria to produce as much gas as it can to be able to generate as much power as it can.
Mr. Werner Ayukegba, I really thank you for a very honest conversation about the energy space on the African continent. We are Senior Vice President, of course, at the Africa Energy Chamber. We look forward to the summit. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on Arise News on the Arise Exchange. We appreciate your time.